What's up guys, this is Chetty. Welcome to my YouTube channel. So in this video, we've already gotten through the basics of how conceptually unit tests work, and now we're going to actually start diving into frameworks. And frameworks are just there to make your life easier. There's nothing a framework can do that you couldn't do yourself. In theory, just like in our previous video, we went and made our own test, but the beauty about unit testing frameworks is that they give you the ability to just right click, and you'll see you can get access to what is called a test explorer, sometimes called a test runner, but a test explorer, test runner is going to make it so that you can quickly see all of your tests that have passed. And these frameworks, like I said, give you the ability to integrate very easily within this, and especially within Visual Studio. Visual Studio Code, you still can use, they still have test runners in Visual Studio Code, but you just cannot beat the robustness of unit testing in Visual Studio. It's unmatched, and it's probably one of the best in the industry, and one of the reasons why Visual Studio still has such a stranglehold on the enterprise market. So I'm done talking, and we're going to go in here. You could, if you want to, you can just go ahead and create a totally new console app, but I'm just going to go up here and add a new project. I'm going to add a new console app. You could restart Visual Studio and just create one without the actual unit test course in here, but I think, in my opinion, it's easier just to kind of right click on this and go ahead and add a new console app. And we're going to call this, we're going to make a fake network utility. So something to send pings and maybe do some DNS. And I say fake because it's not going to actually be doing any of these things. It's just, we're just going to stub or mock or whatever you want to call it. So network, and we're just going to call it a network utility. If I can type it correctly. Okay, great. So we got our network utility. Then what we want to do is we want to go back to add again. We're going to go to new project. We're going to go to XUnit test project. It's already going to have it. We're going to go to next. Then we're going to call it network utility dot test. And you could name this anything that you want to. You could just call it test, and you could take out the dot, but by convention, you usually see network utility dot test. That's kind of a standard within the software development industry. You always see it that way. In the unit test course, we're not even going to be using it anymore. So let's go ahead. We can actually remove it, but you could leave it there if you want to. It doesn't matter. Okay, so we're gonna go in here, create a folder, and we're gonna call this ping, because we're going to be building some type of quote ping utility. And within this folder, we're going to add a C# class, and we're going to call this network service. Great. Network service. And then under here, we're going to add a folder, and we're going to call it ping tests. And within under here, we're going to add a new item, and we're going to call it network service tests. Just like that. Change this to public. We could leave that. Yeah, let's leave that one because it gives us one little test that we can kind of test out. We've got our program, we've got our hello world, and let's actually go into, and let's just see if we can get this test, this network utility test, make sure that it's hooked up and it's working before we even start. So what you want to do is you want to go up to your test, and you want to go to run all test. And fingers crossed this should work. Okay, great. So Visual Studio, this is another great thing about Visual Studio, is that it goes in and it does all of this for you. It finds all of the unit tests for you, and you don't have to actually hook anything up. It will automatically, like I really don't even know how it does it, but it just automatically finds it, and it gives you this great test runner, test explorer, so you can quickly see the total number of tests, you can see the past test, and you can see the failed test, and it'll give the time. This thing can run like thousands. Like I'm talking like you should be, when you are building out your unit test or when you're using a unit test in a production environment, you're going to have thousands of these, and 1,000 tests should take like 5 seconds to run. That's how quick it should be, and that's what you're looking for. And we will go into our network service and go ahead and let's create some fake classes. Like these are going to be totally fake. They're not going to be anything. You could call this Pokemon service. You could call this whatever you want to. It's not, the point is that we're going to go in here. We are going to test strings. We are going to test numbers. We are going to test dates. We're going to test objects, and we are going to test enumerables. And the important point here is that you're learning, number one, that you're not so much looking at testing the internals. Like I said, when you think about unit tests, you should look at it more. You think of it as you're like testing like if you could test a human body. Like I'm going to give you, you're going to use arrange, act, assert, and I am going to give you a glass of water. You're going to drink the glass of water, and you're going to return, what I talked about before. So you're going to excrete something, and you are trying to test whatever this body is returning. And that's the most gross. That's the only way I could really describe it, because it is such a strange concept. You're not so much worried about what's going on inside the function. You're more so, what's this function returning? So think about it more like that, and don't get so bogged down about what am I actually, what's going on inside the function. Just think of it more as you're trying to figure out, you're trying to test what this function is returning. And if you're coming in here from another video and you just heard me, give that analogy, watch my previous video so you can get a better understanding of kind of like what I'm talking about, because that may have sounded pretty freaky just coming in here. So what we're going to do for this one, the most simple thing that we could possibly do is we're just going to return a ping. And the way that this is going to send a ping, or the way that this function is going to quote unquote send a ping, and it's not really sending a ping, is going to return a string that just says ping sent. And this is important because just imagine, there's actually like a bunch of functions in here. Like first it'll search for DNS. Imagine there's a function here, search DNS, search DNS and build packet. But we aren't testing any of that yet. We are just so much focused on what are we actually returning back, and we're going to test this function here as if it were some type of, I don't know, we're actually sending a ping that returns this string that says ping sent. And I'll actually here add success ping sent. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to bring this over here, and then we want to actually start looking into this unit test. And the great thing about XUnit is that as of just now, we just have to put fact. Fact is a fancy way of just, it's almost like if you just had this, like I think even Microsoft's testing framework just has like test as an attribute, but fact is just, imagine it's just an attribute that's going to allow the test runner. That's what the real reason why we have these little things up here, so that the test runner can give us these cool, test passed, and we can run all of these in the test runner. Otherwise, it won't be able to actually see it. And once again, we need to start building the actual method name for this. So as I mentioned before, the typical naming convention is you're going to have the class name. So we have network service underscore. So that's the class name. And then we're going to put the method name. And then the method name is send ping. And then we're going to put what type of action in the third one. So underscore, so class underscore method underscore what we want to happen. And it's going to return string. Awesome. So that is the first one. Also, we have to remember to put our fact up here. So we're going to have fact. We control dot, we bring in XUnit. Then we go down here, we're going to arrange. So as the human body example, we're going to go get our glasses of water, which are going to be things like our variables, classes, mocks, which we'll talk about here in a second. And we put them in here because we need whatever we need our glass of water to put into the human body. But in this one, we don't actually have any variables to pass in, so I don't think we actually have to arrange anything, but we do have to act, obviously. And the way that we act in the most simple, very simple case, this is like the most simple example that we can possibly imagine. We're going to actually new up, or we're going to bring in our network service. So we go network service. And because, let me see here. In Visual Studio 2022, it will automatically add the reference for it. If you're using an older version of Visual Studio, in order to add the reference, and I'm just going to go ahead and add the reference right here, you will have to go in here and you will have to go to add reference. You go project reference, and then you go to the network utility and you add the network utility as a reference. Otherwise it won't. But because we're in a newer version of Visual Studio, it will automatically do all of that for us. So we're going to go in here, and you could just use XUnit's regular assert. Like there's assert that's already built into XUnit. There's already assertions that are built into XUnit, but in today's testing environment, what most people, and I actually agree, I think that this is actually a magnificent framework. I think Fluent Assertions are a really good framework. They give way better error messages or exception. They have way better error messages than actual XUnit. So Fluent Assertions, and it's way more robust, and there's all types of cool extension methods. It's just a really handy framework that will make your test a lot better. And I'm not somebody who likes to use the newest, hottest framework, but I can sort of I honestly agree that Fluent Assertions is awesome. So ping service is actually going to be in a range, and it doesn't. You really don't even need to have this arrange act assert. It's not like a big thing that you have to do. Your employer might not ask you to do it. They might though, but I always err on the side of having just going ahead and typing out arrange act assert, because it does make it look a lot better. So when we act, the act is actually the act of the human drinking the water. So we went and got our variables. So arrange is going and getting everything that you need for the test. The act is the actual execution of the function, or the act is the person actually drinking the water. And then we're going to go in here and we're going to actually execute this function right here within this class. So just remember that assertions are as complicated or as easy as you want to make them, and it's your job as the developer to kind of meet that middle ground. If you do too many assertions, you're going to make your tests so rigid and annoying that people are going to do things like try to go around them, and you're going to have people get frustrated by how strict your tests are. But if you make them too easy, bugs will fall through the cracks, which is what you don't want either. So in this case with a string, what I did is I just pulled up Fluent Assertions, and I think whenever you're writing these tests, you can't remember all of this, stuff in here. So you just kind of have to bring it up and pull it to the side or wherever you put your, most developers have dual screens, but if you don't, that's okay too. And just kind of pull it up to the side here, and I'm going to pull it up on the other screen, but just pull yours up to the side and look at them from there. And I'll actually leave the link for the strings down in the description. But okay, so Fluent Assertions work like this. They are you dot, so you bring your result down, whatever you had right here, you bring your result down, and then you have a should, and should's going to be what you're going to use 99% of the time, and then you're going to have all these, not be null, be empty, not be empty, have a length of this, be null or white space, not be null or white space, and just kind of gauge what you think is going to be the most appropriate for the test. And it's really an art. There's no hard, fast rule. I would say maybe if there is a hard, fast rule, maybe try to put 3 or 5 assertions down here. And if you start having more than that, maybe if it's a really complicated one, but for something really simple like this, you're only probably going to need about 5 of them. So of course it should not be null or white space. If this network service returns a null or a white space, that definitely means something wrong. This is a very strict case right here, and this one is going to be B, and then we're actually going to pass in the exact string. And in this case, this one actually makes sense, but if this were a production environment, that may be a little bit too strict because that means it has to. But in this case, it is returning this, and it should, and it definitely should. If it's not returning it, something has definitely gone wrong. But in your case, it could be totally different. But there's also ones that are kind of in the middle. So that's kind of in the middle of a very strict case would be contain and exactly, and it's going to say exactly once. So exactly once in this string that we are returning, we are going to be checking to make sure that at least the word success is in this test case. And we just wrote our very first test like that, and that's pretty much it. There is more complicated stuff. We're gonna have to talk about mocking, but that's pretty much the gist of it. If you can kind of get the idea of this right here, it's really not that much more complicated. And let's go ahead. What you always want to do is you just want to go in here, you want to run all the tests, and yep, it worked. So let me see here. So Test Explorer went down and it found our test. Awesome. Network sim ping returns, and we are ready to go. We are off to the races. I'm actually just going to delete this. This is more so just to make sure that our test runner is working, and we don't need that anymore. So within this exact same test, I always say usually within the same class, you kind of want to keep all the same tests, but that's not always the case. And you may, maybe you have other ping tests, but try to keep this structure right here because that's kind of a good, common structure. Sorry, I'm starting to lose my voice a little bit. So the next thing that we are going to test out is going to be integers. And integers, this one is going to be, let's just say we want to test the ping timeout. Just for whatever reason, these functions don't really even make sense. Like I said, you're not so much focusing on what's actually going on in the function. You're more so focusing on what's being returned. So it doesn't even really matter what's going on in the function. We're testing mainly what functions are returning. So we've got our ping. So we've got a ping timeout, and it's literally just taking in 2 numbers and adding them. And just for some odd reason, we're just going to call that a ping timeout, even though it has nothing to do with that. So we're going to go in here, and now we're going to use what's called a theory. And a theory really isn't that much different from a fact, but a theory is going to let you pass in variables, or inline data as it's sometimes called. So with integers, you're going to want to pass in this function in particular, we have the ability to pass in variables. And this inline data thing seems kind of innocuous, or it seems like it's not really that big of a deal, but it allows us to make very flexible, robust tests that we can, you can have multiple one of these. So if we wanted another one, call inline data, and let's just say we're going to pass in 2, 2, and we're going to have a 4 here. And you may be wondering, let me just go ahead and get this method name typed out. So once again, we have network service, have your class, underscore, we're going to have ping timeout, then underscore, and this is going to return int. So we have that. We're going to have that down there. Let me see here. So it's giving us this error, I think, because we need to actually pass in this. We need to have the actual, we need to pass in the actual variables that we need for our ping timeout function. Then we're going to have right here int, and then we have this expected. So that's where the third number comes from. With the inline data, you've got your 1, which goes in here. You've got your 1 that goes in here, or your 2 or whatever. And then the expected number is going to be what you're going to plug in as the expected. Excuse me. My voice is starting to go up in streaming all day. So here we have, let's do our act. So we have arrange. Then we have act. Then we have assert. So with this one, we need to go ahead and we need to actually bring in our ping service. And in a minute, I will teach you guys how to make it so that you don't have to type in each and every time this network service. And I'm going to do this in the next video. I'm going to have to take a break here in a second, and I'll show you how you can bring in this ping service so you don't have to type it in for each one. But for this one, just so people don't get too confused, we'll just bring it in down here. Then, once again, we're going to do our assert. We're going to bring in our ping timeout. In the ping timeout, we're going to pass in our A and our B. Isn't that neat? So you go in here, go A, you have B. Then you may be wondering, well, what's with the expected? The expected is going to be actually where our assert comes in. So we're going to call this result. And you could name it whatever you wanted to. You could call it, return, whatever. Or not return because that's a keyword, but you could call it ping result or some other, you could give it some other name, but I'm just going to call it result. And then you go down here, and then we're going to use this fluent. That's why they call it fluent assertions, because it's a fluent pattern. We're going to go should, and it should be the expected. And just like all of the other types of assertions, you just go in here, close out this annoying ad, and then you have all of these different assertions. And nobody, like I said, nobody can remember all of these, so you just kind of have to pull it up and pick which one that you want. There's nobody's going to be able to remember all of this, so I'm just going to go through, kind of pluck out a couple and run this test and try to make it as flexible or as strict as I can without making it too strict. So go in here, we're going to go dot, and let me just check here. Let's do b greater than or equal to, b greater than or equal to 3. And it's going to run that assertion. It's going to assert on that. We're going to go should again and not be in range. and it should not be in a range, I don't know, negative 1000 to 0. Let's just say like it has to be above 0. And I'm sure there's some kind of infinity thing that you could do to make sure that it's always positive, but for this case, we're just going to do this one. So going to go ahead and run this test. Hope to God this thing works. Didn't work. Expected result to 3. Oh, okay, great. So it did work. Let me see. Expected result, but found 2 should be greater than or equal. Oh, okay. So it should be. So it's greater than or equal to, but it found 2. Okay, so it actually failed the test because this one was actually lower, and the test worked. The test worked. So we're gonna go down here. We're gonna run it again, and the test worked. Anyway, my voice is starting to get a little raspy. I hope that you guys enjoyed this. In the next video, we're going to be doing objects. We're going to be doing dates and a little bit more complicated stuff. Hope that you guys enjoyed it. If you did, make sure you hit that like button. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. And as always, thank you for watching.